Hi, my name is Sam Moman and I'm the founder of the Sports Executive Path. The Sports Executive Path is an e-learning center which is focused on people who want to enter the sports industry or alternatively to professionals who want deeper understanding in the different fields of sports management. Today, I will be presenting our course about the business of eSports. The industry has a wide range of different jobs available, and if you'd like to get involved in eSports, it's important to understand how it operates and what makes eSports such a unique opportunity. Some of the highlights of this course and what you will eventually learn is the following. What are eSports? How eSports developed? What is online streaming and its relevance to eSports? What kind of people are eSports fans and where are they from? In what ways are eSports organizations and competitors able to interact with their fans? Where does the money for eSports events come from and who profits from them? The different levels of organizational structure that make up the eSports industry. What goes into holding an eSports event? Can eSports continue to grow in the future, and what might happen if the growth slows down? How eSports compete with regular sports and what sports organizations are doing about it? Technological improvements to eSports and what it means for the future of the sport. The idea is that not only this course, but all future courses are actionable and that you can implement the ideas immediately. There is a workbook to write down not only your notes, but to provide links to all relevant content discussed in each chapter. Please feel free as well to check out the other courses available here. So without further ado, let's begin. Welcome to this course on the business of eSports. In just a few decades, eSports have gone from a niche event enjoyed by a small group of people to becoming a huge global industry. Today, the eSports industry has an estimated value of more than $1 billion, and this figure looks set to continue to grow. While there may not be any danger of eSports overtaking the sports industry in the near future, the industries do directly compete for the attention of fans. Several top sports executives have spoken about the threat that eSports represent to traditional sports and how young viewers are increasingly becoming more focused on eSports over sports like football, cricket, and tennis. This course will be an introduction to eSports and the industry that has arisen around competitive video gaming. You'll be able to learn how the industry operates behind the scenes, including how the organization structure works, where the money comes from, and issues facing the industry. Esports are still an emerging competition, but there is a lot that can be learned from how organizations have capitalized on the growing trend and what it means for other sports. This course will not only introduce you to topics on the esports industry, but will also be taking a more in-depth look at how everything fits together. The esports industry is vast and rapidly growing, so there's a lot to cover. And by the end of the course, you should have a good understanding of what it takes to be successful in the industry. A lot can happen in a few years, as we've seen from the rapid growth of esports, but this course will also cover what the future might hold. So far, the industry has shown it can rapidly adapt to changes, and no doubt that will continue as changes in technology and fan expectations apply new pressures to the industry. What you will learn. Throughout this course, You have the chance to learn more about the esports industry and key concepts that the industry is based around. There will be plenty of real-life examples for you to see those concepts in action, and we'll also be examining several case studies in detail. Once you've completed the course, you have learned the following. What are esports? How esports developed? What is online streaming and its relevance to esports? What kind of people are esports fans and where they come from? How important mobile phones are to the growing industry? In what ways are esports organizations and competitors able to interact with their fans? What is the connection between gambling and esports, and what implications does this have? Where does the money for esports events come from and who profits from them? The different levels of organizational structure that makes up the esports industry. What goes into holding an esports event? How esports events have changed over time and adapted to changes. Do esports have a future at the Olympics? Are women fairly treated by the esports industry, and what can be done to improve female participation in the sport? How prevalent is cheating in esports, and what can be done to prevent it? All about match fixing and how it threatens the integrity of the industry. Can esports continue to grow in the future, and what might happen if the growth slows down? How esports compete with regular sports and what sports organizations are doing about it. What is league franchising and what effect will it have on the industry? Technological improvements to esports and what it means for the future of the sport. What are esports? Esports are any form of organized video game competition. Video games have come a long way since their early days, and now players can choose from thousands of different games which span across hundreds of different genres. This golden age of video gaming has brought with it millions of fans, and it's estimated that more than 2 billion people around the world now play video games. With such a large potential fan base, the popularity of esports events has also exploded in recent years. The increasing availability of high-speed internet has meant that fans from all over the world can view high-definition streams of their favorite games being played by high-level competitive players. For fans of video games, watching the best players is akin to watching the highest-level athletes compete against each other. These days, esports competitions fill out huge arenas with thousands of fans in attendance and millions watching live streams. Esport competitors can win millions of dollars in prizes, as events can rake in huge amounts of money from sponsorships, media rights, and other revenue sources. Some of the best esports competitors now belong to organized teams which, just like professional sports teams, will provide training, salaries, and coaches. Interest in esports is growing, with 2019 showing a 16% increase in the number of casual and serious fans from the previous years. As viewing numbers grow, events get bigger, and so do the prizes and the industry itself. Esports represents a real threat to traditional sports, as many young fans are now more likely to watch video game competitions than sports, thanks to them being more easily accessible.
Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic, and today we're discussing esports. This video is not intended for people that are familiar and know this topic inside and out, but rather for folks that don't know what this means or don't understand its significance. So if you're in the first category, share this video with someone in the second category. What does the term esport mean? It's literally short for electronic sports, meaning video games that can be played competitively, either as an individual or as a team. This idea of competing has existed since video games themselves have existed. We had people playing Space Invaders to beat the high score. Arcades were places where heroes could be made, people breaking records and becoming local celebrities. When PC gaming became popular, this is where people began to play against strangers, people who could be in other countries even. This launched the era of international icons, teams and players that could claim to be the best in the world. We jump forward to now. This is not a history lesson. There are many games that are considered esports. They have tournaments and prizes and plenty of chances for people to compete. If you're a developer and you can find a way to make your game competitive, this can extend the lifetime of a game considerably. However, many games tout themselves as an esport, but if they don't gain traction, their competitive scene is not strong, and this could make or break the reputation of a game. Now let's look at some prime examples. One of the most well-known is something called League of Legends, which I have an entire video describing. This game was released formally in 2009 and has been supported since, with competitions and tournaments around the world. The 2016 World Championship for League of Legends attracted over 43 million viewers online, and the prize pool was over $6 million. This is their job. These people that travel and compete, they are sponsored by companies with endorsements that can support them financially between competitions. The latest estimate is that over 100 million people play League of Legends in an average month. This game was created and sustained by Riot Games. League's biggest competitor is called Dota 2, short for Defense of the Ancients. Dota's latest tournament, held at the Key Arena in Seattle, gave over $9 million to the winning team alone, plus millions more to the runners-up. This competition was streamed across the internet as well as being aired on various ESPN channels. Esports don't always look like this genre of game. A recent example is Overwatch, a team-based shooter that has gotten much traction, from Blizzard, the same company that created the games Warcraft and Starcraft, both of which I have videos describing. Check out the description if you're curious about those games. Now, like actual sports, these competitive teams have staffs of trainers and scheduling coordinators. They're also owned like sports teams are, some with very notable owners including professional athletes like Shaquille O'Neal, Magic Johnson, and Alex Rodriguez, who all own or co-own their own teams. Since this can be a lucrative career, many young people might want to pursue this to live the dream. They likely start playing young and might even choose universities that have prestigious esports programs or teams. It's becoming more and more common for universities to treat these competitors as other athletes are, meaning there are significant scholarships for these athletes to attend a given university, knowing that a successful team can boost that university's prestige at an international level. But also, like professional athletes, injuries can be devastating. A wrist injury might ruin your career at just 20 years old. A case of carpal tunnel could cost you millions. The injuries might be very different, but the effect is just as significant, hence why they might focus on conditioning and training for intensive gaming. So in a nutshell, this is a legitimate movement and doesn't show any signs of slowing down. It's a billion-dollar industry and one that you'll likely see more and more of as it gets more and more mainstream coverage. Do you play any games competitively?
Why study the business of esports? As the esports industry grows, it presents an excellent opportunity for career and business growth. It's a slightly unorthodox area of study compared to more traditional subjects, but its rapidly increasing popularity means that there's more demand than ever for professionals who understand the industry. Many universities across the world are now beginning to offer degrees in esports. These degrees and courses give people the chance to learn about how the world of esports works. If you'd like to get in on the ground floor of this rapidly growing industry, taking a closer look at the business of esports is a great idea. While it's impossible to know for sure what the future may hold for the industry, this course aims to give you everything you need to be successful in the field of esports. You will learn the history of esports, why the industry has grown so quickly, and where it may be heading next. The history of eSports. Esports haven't always been around, of course. The concept only came about with the popularization of video games. While the first video games were invented in the 1950s, it wasn't until the 70s and 80s that they started to become mainstream. In this chapter, you'll be learning about the complete history of esports, including how they first came about, when they broke through into the mainstream, and what has happened along the way. Understanding history is important as it gives us an idea of how change can affect the industry. Through this, we can better understand the present state of esports and how they might change in the future. For any industry you work in, understanding the history and foundations of the industry are important. You can learn a lot just by looking into the past. This chapter will help to increase your understanding of how esports were created and why. You'll learn about why they've been growing steadily since their inception and what has caused the sudden rapid increase in mainstream attention. The early years. The very first video games were created in the 1950s, following the development of electronics and the cathode ray display. Early video games were created in universities as concepts to trial and demonstrate programming and electronic design. These early games were usually fairly simple or based on real-world board games like draughts and noughts and crosses. As technology improved and electronics became smaller and faster, researchers were able to create more complex games. The 1962 release of the game Space War was one of the earliest examples of a video game being created for non-academic purposes. The game was developed by a team of researchers at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and released to the public to use. It featured 2 spaceships which were each controlled by a separate player. Space War gained a lot of popularity among American universities, and the competitive nature of the game was a big factor how much people enjoyed it. In 1972, magazine Rolling Stone sponsored the first intergalactic Space War Olympics, which was held at Stanford University in California. While this early esports tournament only awarded the victor with a year-long subscription to Rolling Stone magazine, it laid the foundation for future competitions and helped to inspire the competitive video gaming community. During the 70s, the popularity of video games was growing as better technology meant better games. Video game arcades became a popular place for young people to hang out, and games like Pong, Space Invaders, and Asteroids helped to introduce more people than ever to video games. The popularity of arcades saw players always trying to beat the top high scores. Many arcade owners held regular competitions and awarded prizes to anyone who could top the leaderboard. In 1980, a nationwide competition in the US was held to find the best Space Invaders player. The event was hosted by Atari, the game's developer, and was open to anyone. It attracted more than 10,000 participants and is thought to have helped to popularize esports and bring them to mainstream attention. Before Space Invaders, video games were still considered a novelty, but the release of the game saw it break down barriers and turn video games into a fully fledged industry. In a few decades, the Space Invaders tournament would lead to the global esports industry we know it today. Walter Day, an arcade owner, had watched the Space Invaders tournament with a lot of interest and saw the appeal in competitive gaming on a larger scale. He collaborated with Namco in helping to set rules and regulations for competitive arcade gaming and helped to create unified rules for high score runs in games. Later on, They would also create the first ever eSports team in 1983.
Hi, I'm Medium Invader from the classic video game Space Invaders, and I want to tell you a little bit about where video games came from. A video game is an electronic game that has an interface designed for human interaction on a video device. Simple. Video games are used by scientists, the military, and people like you, and their evolution has spread across arcades, consoles, computers, smartphones, and all kinds of other electronics. These days, video games are everywhere, but they were actually made in science labs. In fact, the earliest US video game patent on record was in 1948, and at the time, it was referred to as a cathode ray tube amusement device. That's a mouthful. Some of the earliest video games include the Nimrod computer, Oxo, Tennis for Two, and my personal favorite, Space War. But none of these early video games were ever sold to the public because they were either too huge or too expensive to get out of the lab. This all changed when a man named Ralph Baer looked at his television screen and wondered how else it might be used. In 1972, Baer's idea to get video games out of the science lab and into the living room led to the release of a game console called Odyssey. Odyssey allowed you to play a game on your TV. At about the same time, two other people, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, were working on something similar in a little company called Atari. You might have heard of it, and even if you haven't, I'm sure that your dad has. Atari's first major game release was in 1972, an arcade game called Pong. It was an immediate hit, and it's credited as the first commercially successful video game. Atari then released a home version of Pong in 1974. By 1978, competition between Atari and another game company called Midway was heating up. Midway had licensed an arcade game from the Japanese company Taito that put them on the map. The game? Space Invaders. It featured iconic actors like me, and it went on to become the second highest selling arcade game of all time. Space Invaders also helped kick off what is known as the golden age of arcade games. In response, Atari followed with the release of the arcade game Asteroids. It ranked 6th on the list of highest-selling arcade games. It was a good game, but it's no Space Invaders. By 1980, color came to arcade games, and this was also the year that another video gaming milestone was born. Pac-Man, created by the Japanese company Namco, was brought to the US by Midway. Important to the spread of video games into popular culture, Pac-Man was a character that could be licensed. It wasn't long before it had a song in the charts, a Saturday morning television show, and all sorts of other products. In just a year, Pac-Man arcade games made over $1 billion in quarters. Then, in 1981, a company called Nintendo started making waves in the US video game market with their release of Donkey Kong. It was the earliest video game to have a storyline. The story went a bit like this. Donkey Kong is the pet of a carpenter named Jumpman. Jumpman mistreats his pet ape, so the ape steals his girlfriend, leaving the game player to assume the role of Jumpman and rescue the girl. Jumpman was eventually renamed to Mario. Other iconic arcade games from the early 80s include Frogger, Dragon's Lair, and Mario Brothers. Perhaps the last iconic game considered to be part of the golden age of arcade games is Double Dragon. It was the first really successful example of the beat-em-up genre. It was released in 1987, and like Donkey Kong, it featured a damsel in distress storyline, a storyline common in many video games. By the mid-90s, the golden age of arcade games was coming to an end, and the home game console was gaining in popularity. While arcade games continued to decline in sales over the years, the popularity of video games was merely beginning. We will talk about that and a lot more in part 2 of a brief history of video games.
The growth of eSports. As the years went by, the technology used for video games continued to improve. Home consoles became a thing in the late 80s, and companies like Sega and Nintendo released popular games consoles with lots of unique and exciting games. In 1990, Nintendo created its own esports competition with the Nintendo World Championships. Around this time, the release of Capcom's arcade game Street Fighter allowed two players to compete against each other at the same time. This led to further competition as players were no longer just setting high scores, but actively battling against each other. The success of the game meant that many other titles soon followed. Games developers started to place more of a focus on multiplayer games, which allowed for competitive play. In Germany, the Electronic Sports League was founded in 1998. Now known as the ESL, this league is the oldest eSports league still in business and remains one of the largest eSports organizations today. Originally known as Deutsche Clanliga, the organization rebranded in the year 2000 and soon began popularizing eSports competition across Europe. Other countries were also starting to get into competitive video gaming, and one of the main driving forces behind the success of eSports today was South Korea. The Korean government invested a lot of resources into improving the internet infrastructure of the country, which saw more citizens able to get online. In South Korea, internet cafes became an extremely popular way for young people to access the internet and were often used to play video games. Competitions regularly broke out, and cafes would hold regular tournaments to find the best players. In the year 2000, the South Korean government created the Korea eSports Association to manage and regulate eSports competitions in the country. The main goal of this government body was to make eSports an official sport and help popularize them. The focus of the organization was to standardize rules, organize events, and arrange broadcasting deals with TV networks. As the sport grew, the Korea eSports Association also helped to create dedicated eSports gaming venues and has worked to improve the working conditions of eSports athletes. This includes setting a minimum salary and minimum one-year contracts for all eSports competitors. The organization has also introduced ranking systems to give fans a better idea of the best players. This effort by the Korean government led to video gaming becoming much more mainstream in South Korea, and many more people were intrigued by the concept of competitive video games. Korean TV networks such as OnGameNet and MBC Game were launched at the start of the new millennium as a way for fans to watch 24/7 coverage of their favorite events. Similar channels were also launched in the US and Europe, with esports now becoming more of a mainstream. Online streaming, the new frontier. Esports, having their own TV channels, was the start of their mainstream acceptance, but it was the introduction of online streaming that really helped to kickstart the esports revolution. Esports have become highly popular with younger viewers and those who have grown up using online video and streaming platforms such as YouTube and Twitch. These platforms have helped to bring esports to more people around the world, and as the services are free to use, provide greater accessibility than traditional sports. In 2005, video sharing platform YouTube was founded and began a new trend of sharing clips and videos over the internet. YouTube quickly became the dominant video service on the internet and hosted videos on just about any topic you can think of. As YouTube relies on user-generated content, the videos on the site tend to reflect the user base. From its inception, YouTube became a great place for gamers to share clips and edited videos of them playing video games. Today, 2 out of the top 5 biggest YouTube channels are entirely based around video games, and more than 200 million people watch gaming content on YouTube each day. A large proportion of these viewers watch people play to understand how to get better at their favorite games. YouTube quickly became a place for people to catch up on the latest esports tournaments, and channels owned by esports organizations amassed large followings. Around 2009, YouTube started to experiment with online streaming, a way for people to watch live events through the internet. In 2011, however, a new site named Twitch was launched, which would catapult video game streaming into the mainstream. Twitch was formed as a spin-off of general streaming site Justin.tv and was meant to serve as a place for live-streamed video game content, including esports. By 2013, Twitch had eclipsed Justin TV into popularity and reached more than 45 million unique viewers. A year later, Twitch became the fourth most visited website in the United States, and later that year, it was bought by e-commerce and entertainment giant Amazon for close to $1 billion. By 2018, Twitch had surpassed YouTube for online gaming video content and had more than 15 million daily users. Esports are one of the most popular categories on the website, although general video gaming content is also very popular. For esports, streaming services like Twitch have helped to introduce the events to a wider audience. Between 2012 and 2020, the number of hours of esports events watched globally has increased by around 1 billion hours. Rather than needing to pay broadcaster to feature esports events, tournament organizers can provide live streams to services like Twitch at a minimal cost. Such is its impact on the video gaming community that game developers and console manufacturers, included Sony and Microsoft, are integrating streaming functionality into their games and consoles. While Twitch is still the main esports streaming channel, other competitors in the market include YouTube, Ustream, and others. These sites all provide an excellent platform for esports to flourish and reach fans around the world. TV was a big factor in the explosion in sports fans. Online streaming has had a similar effect on the popularity of esports. Mainstream acceptance and beyond. Esport tournaments and events were a thing in Europe and the US since the 80s. But it wasn't until the success of esports in Korea that the industry really started to take off. The Korean esports model laid the foundations of how the industry should operate and helped to start what has now become a billion-dollar market. One of the main reasons for esports finally taking off was because game developers realized that creating a strong fan base and competitive scene was an excellent way to prolong the life cycle of a game. Normally, a game will be an expensive product to develop and once released, will last a few years or maybe longer if it has regular expansions. With esports, developers saw a way to promote their games and develop a core fan base that would still be playing for years to come. Games can cost tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars and many years to create. It makes sense then for a developer or publisher to try to prolong the game's lifespan for as long as possible. Game developers often release new content such as new levels, maps, and characters, but promoting games using esport was a new concept. Games publishers started offsetting the costs of organizing tournaments, including putting up prize money for big events. This led to some big changes in just how much esports competitors can win, and between the year 2000 and 2013, the amount of prize money grew by millions of dollars. More money also meant better production values from broadcasts and esports events taking over traditional sports channels like ESPN. As esports have become more popular, they've also attracted the attention of sponsors and advertisers. Platforms such as Twitch and YouTube are free to use, but users will usually need to watch ads before or during a stream. Computer and video game companies are often big sponsors of esports events as they know they'll be advertising directly to their target demographic. Other esports sponsors have included car manufacturers like Honda, Nissan, and BMW, soft drink brands like Red Bull and Mountain Dew. Even Nike has recently stepped into the esports arena by sponsoring the biggest esports tournament, the League of Legends League. These big sponsorships have helped to legitimize the sport in the eyes of many and will no doubt lead to bigger companies starting to take notice. One of the main selling points of esports to its fans is that almost every game played is unique in some way. While a lot of games may have similar mechanics, the overall style, rules, or events are often very different. Compared to regular sports, esports have a huge amount of variety, meaning fans can watch hours of games without losing interest. In 2018, esports events were featured for the first time at a traditional sports competition. The 2019 Asian Games, held in Indonesia, featured esports as a demonstration sport. Medals could be won in the events, but they wouldn't count towards the total medal tallies of each country. This inclusion on the world stage has meant esports are attracting more attention than ever. The International Olympic Committee has recently announced it is considering the addition of esports into the Olympics. Since its early beginnings, esports have come a long way. The industry is now larger than anyone could have predicted when those early esports competitions were first held in the arcades back in the 1980s.
We did some journalism this weekend and attended the first ever Overwatch League finals in Barclays Center in Brooklyn. The London Spitfire defeated the Philadelphia Fusion, but who won was probably the least eye-opening detail of all, because when we got there, we couldn't even find seats because the crowd was that sold out. It all felt very real to me, Bo. It all felt like a real live sporting type event. And I enjoyed myself. How much did you enjoy yourself?
I did enjoy myself. I left and I thought to myself, it's going to be me in a room full of people like Pablo who have never done to basketball before. But alas, Rick Fox was sitting behind us.
That's right.
Because Rick Fox owns an esports team. No, man, this is like they're on it. Like they are. What was interesting to me about it is that the broadcast and everything else, like all of it is sports stuff. Like they've adopted all the things that we do in the presentation of sports and they brought it here. And the question as to whether or not it's going to become mainstream, I feel like it's kind of out of our hands. I don't know how long it is going to take, but kids are so charged up about this. We left after it. We had like wristbands that were from it. And we were giving them away to kids. And, like kids we didn't even know were just like, oh my God, thank you so much. And the part that I think that gets lost in this is participatory for them. Like part of the appeal of sports is we've all played sports. This is what they're doing. This is what they play. The difference is though, we'll watch sports even if we don't play them. I don't know if people are going to watch this if they don't play the sport.
That's the difference, is that right now, this event and this league is so catered to the experts, so catered to the people who have done this before, and the cosplay was also there and an amazing fact in this. But it's there for people who get that culture. And I think it's going to take some sort of translation to the mainstream for this to truly grow. But man, the entire trappings of this, it all felt like, man, there is a lot of money here and there is a lot of attention here. And those two things are two ingredients for a first ever league. That's pretty good.
Yeah, but one thing I will say though is you say that the culture here, what I found interesting about it is I don't know what the culture is. Like you looked at the merchandising and the things like that, it's all adopted from other stuff and they're kind of throwing it together.
Scarves, Boston versus everybody.
Yeah, like it's all from everybody else. So like culturally, I don't know what exactly it is that we're going to get out of this, but I tell you this, I met this dude, he was an agent He's an agent
Yep.
for these players. And I wanted to talk to him about it, just find out what the economy of it was. He told me like what the percentage is that he gets, the percentage, you know, on the other stuff that he gets. But he looked at me and he said, you know, one of my players just won here. He was on the winning team, where the winning team was 5 people that split $1 million. And he said he felt so good for the guy because he'd had a wrist injury during the season, and that how down he was like as he dealt with the wrist injury. And then, you know, just going through this and overcoming it and then getting to the place of where that was. And as much as I would like love to have dismissed this as being ridiculous, that's what I talk about every day. Like, I can't knock them. That's just what they happen to do.
Right. And you figure that like athletes, maybe it's not Overwatch specifically, but certainly when it comes to Fortnite and all these things, there is at the very least some skill overlap. If hand-eye coordination is something that is required in sports, it is absolutely required here. And does that mean that the jocks can come over and maybe have an edge on the experts in this field? I'd like to see that. I'd like to see those cultures intermingle.
Let me tell you, I get the
and
feeling the last thing those kids want is the regular cool kids to come over and become the cool kids in their world.
I disagree.
I know, because
I think that's how they become the cool kids.
A global audience. As with traditional sports, esports are all about providing entertainment for fans. The global fans of esports are the main reason for the popularity of the events, and as the sport has grown, the audience has grown too. In this chapter, we'll be looking at what kind of people watch esports events and why. Understanding where esports fans come from and their demographics is important if you want to understand the industry as a whole. Ultimately, events must cater to the fans if they want to achieve success, and so events organizers will need to know what their fans enjoy. This chapter will also explore how mobile devices have played a part in the globalization of esports. Mobile technology has come a long way in just a decade, and smartphones are now ubiquitous even in developing countries. As we saw with online streaming, easy access to technology such as the internet and computers has largely been behind the increase in the success of esports events. As more game developers push towards the mobile gaming market, esports executives must also be eyeing this as a lucrative opportunity. You'll also see how esports competitors and organizers are able to engage with fans, creating stronger fan loyalty and making esports events more memorable. Sports have long tried to create better engagement with fans, as this helps to improve ticket sales and create a better matchday experience. With the internet, new avenues for engagement are opening up, and esports are fully exploring this potential. Finally, the chapter will also cover esports betting and what it means for fans, teams, and esports organizations. Traditional sports have been linked to betting throughout history, and now esports are becoming one of the most popular options at many online sportsbooks. Can the esports industry preserve its integrity while partnering with the betting industry, and is enough being done to protect young people from the lure of gambling? Esports demographics. Esports now have a global audience, but the events are still much more popular in some countries than others. As we learned in the previous chapter, the modern esports industry owes a lot of its success to the esports community in South Korea. It will come as no surprise then to learn that South Korea today is still one of the countries with the most fans of competitive video games. In fact, Asia as a whole makes up a considerable amount of the esports industry, with countries like China and Japan also making up a large part of the global esports fan base. Over half of the world's esports viewers come from Asia, while North American makes up around 12%. In China, over 100 million people regularly watch esports events, and the country was home to the very first arena specifically built for esports events back in 2017. China is currently the second largest country behind the US in terms of esports revenue, and if it continues to grow, it may even take the top spot in years to come. The European esports market is also growing, and in 2018 was attracted 86 million viewers. This was a considerable 28% increase from 2016. Germany is currently the largest European esports country and, as we saw in the history of esports, has been involved since the very beginning. A lot of the biggest teams and event organizers are based in Germany, and Berlin has become something of a hub for European esports. Latin America has also seen a large increase in the number of esports fans. Brazil is now the third biggest esports country behind the US and China in terms of viewing figures. Brazil now features multiple TV channels, and Globo, the country's largest media provider, has a dedicated gaming show on its main free-to-view channel. Clearly, esports are now a global phenomenon, and most major developed countries are getting in on the trend. But just who exactly is interested in esports anyway? It's often assumed that younger generations are the most likely to watch video game content. While younger demographics do make up a large portion of the viewership, the largest demographic is 18 to 34-year-olds. Those between the ages of 25 and 34 are more likely to be regular followers of events than the younger viewers. Perhaps predictably, the majority of esports viewers are male, around 70%. However, more women than ever are starting to play and watch video games. In 2016, only 24% of global esports viewers were female, but this increased to around 30% in just 2 years. The number of women playing esports professionally has also increased, something that is bound to help bring in more female viewers in the future. Demographics of esports viewers do change depending on the country, of course. In China, for example, the split between male and female esport viewers is much more even, around 58% male and 42% female. Mobile gaming revolution. Part of the main reason for the growth of any sport is how easy it is for fans to watch content. The rapid growth of mobile technology in the last decade has led to a large number of people who are able to watch content on the internet wherever they go. Mobile phones provide the ability to carry your favorite streams with you without needing to carry around a bulky laptop. You can watch streams on your phone during your commute, on your lunch break, or when you first wake up. Mobiles aren't just a more convenient way to watch esports. Many high-quality games are now being released on mobile platforms. In Asia, the rise of mobile gaming has led to multiple esports leagues and organizations. Mobile phones are fast becoming the #1 way to not just watch esports, but also to play them. In China, 52% of those that watch esports prefer to watch on their mobile device, and 65% regularly play games on their mobiles. Japan and South Korea have slightly lower percentages, but still high enough to show the popularity of mobile gaming is growing. Because of the fact that more people own a mobile phone than own video game consoles or PCs, the mobile esports market has massive potential. Game developers are finally making the use of the technology available, and several high-quality games such as Call of Duty and others have been released on mobiles in recent years. Mobile gaming has been associated with fairly low quality and casual-friendly games for many years. This recent shift in the focus of developers has meant that competitive gamers who enjoy action and shooter games can now enjoy their favorite titles on mobile. The cost of mobile gaming is proving to be one of the biggest factors in its growth. While for many people, PCs and consoles can be prohibitively expensive, a smartphone is often much cheaper. Mobile games also often tend to be free or at least low cost, which means that more players than ever can join in. Developing markets in countries in the Middle East and Africa are seeing larger numbers of mobile gaming users. Around 7 out of 10 internet users in these regions play games on their smartphones. In Latin America, around 6 out of 10 users now play mobile games. It's not just serious gamers who are taking a large number of people who don't consider gaming as one of their primary hobbies play games on their smartphones. As more people play games, the chances of them being introduced to esports also grow. With such a large proportion of the population now owning smartphones, the next few years could be very interesting for mobile gaming and mobile esports. Engaging with fans. With any sport, engaging and entertaining the fans is key. After all, that's where all the money comes from. Without fans, there are no ticket and merchandise sales, no broadcast deals, and no advertising or sponsorships deals. It's important for a sporting event to be able to capture the attention of the fans and leave them feeling positive about the event to keep them coming back for future events. In sports, this is known as fan engagement, and sporting organizations will try to foster a strong link between the club and its fans. Having a stable and consistent group of fans is important for building revenue and can even affect the performance of the athletes on the field. Traditionally, sports have focused on improving the matchday experience for fans to boost engagement. However, in recent years, media rights revenue has outstripped matchday revenue, and most professional sports teams have focused more on building global fan engagement. This has been helped by the invention of social media, which provides an excellent tool for both professional sports organizations and the athletes themselves to connect with fans. Fan engagement is an important factor in the growth of a sport, and while esports seems to be growing fine on its own right now, this will slow down as the market becomes more saturated. For esports organizations to continue building fans and revenue, they need to focus on engaging fans and creating strong loyalty between fans and teams. One of the ways that esports are connecting with fans is through online streams. Many of the top competitors regularly stream their time playing video games for millions of fans to watch and will often chat and interact with their fan base. This level of interaction has never been done before in sports and has helped to propel some competitive players into superstars. Fans can really get behind a player who they feel more connected to, and they're more likely to watch events that the player features in, buy their merchandise, and support them. Esports also utilize social media in much the same way that traditional sports do. Social media is an excellent place to reach millions of people, and competitors and organizations will create short, shareable content for fans to view. These short videos of shareable moments during competitions help to increase awareness of events and build up excitement amongst fans. A lot of esports organizations are also trialing dedicated apps as a way to connect directly with fans. Apps are something that have been used to some degree of success in traditional sports, but with a more technology-focused crowd who are into esports, it could be a game changer. Apps that allow fans to have a degree of social interaction, including talking to other fans while watching events and sharing content with one another, can boost the profile of an event. Today's modern audience demands a more personal and interactive fan experience, and esports look to be providing that in spades. If this level of fan engagement continues, then esports could soon be a real threat to traditional sports. While for now the number of esports fans is considerably lower, the younger age groups that prefer to watch content based around their hobbies and interests could be a deciding factor in the future. Betting on esports. Betting and sports have been closely linked since sports first began. As the birthplace of modern sport, it's perhaps hardly surprising to learn that ancient Greece is where sports betting also began. Sports and betting have shared a close relationship ever since, despite many organizations' efforts to ban gambling. It's hard to imagine sports without also imagining sports betting in some way. Modern sports have close ties to the gambling industry. A lot of major sports teams, particularly in football, are sponsored by betting companies, and for some fans, betting on matches is as important as watching them. Unsurprisingly, esports betting has been popular with esports fans since the beginning of the sport, and with the rise of the global esports industry, the big betting companies have started to take notice. The last few years have seen esports go from being a niche option only offered by a select few bookmakers to being a mainstay feature on the most popular sites. The global sports betting market is estimated to be worth around $250 billion. Esports betting is already big business, and by the end of 2020, it's expected to be worth nearly $13 billion. This significantly surpasses the value of the esports industry itself. One of the main advantages that esports offer to bettors over other sports is the huge number of betting options. Whereas traditional sports will have a few different betting options, each esport is often unique and will have plenty of markets for bettors to choose from. This mix of better options, combined with the availability of online streams for esports, have helped to make esports one of the most popular selections at many of the biggest online sportsbooks. Online gambling platforms are recognizing the potential for esports to bring new fans to the world of betting. In the coming years, we can probably expect to see esports events sponsored by major betting companies. However, there are some signs that this increased growth may have come too early for esports betting. There have been some allegations and accusations of match fixing in the industry. Irregular betting patterns and suspicious player behavior have shone a light on the dark side of esports betting. According to Ian Smith, the commissioner of the Esports Integrity Coalition, the industry is rife with match fixing. While big prizes are available for the top teams, a lot of competitors lower down the rankings don't earn much. This makes them an easy target for match-fixing syndicates, and throwing a match to benefit your opponent is easy and usually hard to detect. If esports wants to be taken seriously and continue to grow, it will need to do something about the match-fixing scandals which occur throughout the sport. Gambling providers should also take a closer look at the situation and see if there is a way for match-fixing risks to be mitigated. Any sport needs to protect its integrity. For a sport that's still as young as esports, it's all the more important that more is done to establish a strong foundation of fair play.
What has happened? What have you learned since the legalized?
It's been exciting. I mean, what we've learned is that there's a lot that's similar, but also a lot of differences from the fantasy sports product and how those customers respond. I was surprised at how many. Well, I was surprised at how many new customers came on. We thought it was going to be mostly overlap, and about half of our customers in New Jersey are brand new to the platform that we try, and we certainly advertise, so I'm sure they knew about the fantasy sports product before. But
is it a different demographic too, Jason?
They tend to be a little younger, but otherwise it's a similar demographic. It's actually quite similar. So it's just people with different interests in different products.
So talk to us about the stickiness. I'm always curious about kind of the retention rates, that you get somebody who's on your platform and they keep coming back.
It's actually really seasonal because it's driven by the sporting calendar. So we always look at year-over-year metrics, which we don't have any for the sportsbook yet. On our fantasy product, we retain almost 80% of our customers year to year. So really hard to tell, though. After the Super Bowl, there's a big drop-off. Then it picks up again for March Madness. So it's hard to tell what the true retention rates are.
Well, what did you see for some of those big events, the Super Bowl and for March Madness?
Super Bowl was by far our biggest day ever. It was huge. We had an unbelievable amount of participation. March Madness was actually a little bit spread out, so it's not the same as that one big day, but overall we had more activity at March Madness than we did on the Super Bowl. It's just over the course of several games instead of one.
So tell me a little bit about esports, and I'm curious, as you guys now a year in, where you're looking for new opportunities, what do you think is the potential for esports? Well,
esports is a product we've had in fantasy for several years now. It's got a very avid following, and we have some cool integrations, like you can actually watch the esports contests on DraftKings while you're playing. So I think it has a lot of potential. It's something that unfortunately in New Jersey is currently prohibited on the betting side, so we're not able to offer esports betting, but I'm hopeful that over time that will be possible, because I think it would make a great betting product. I do wonder about kind of what's standing in the way of full nationwide adoption of legalized betting, online betting? I think it's just going to take time. It's a state-by-state legislative thing, and they all have a different process. Some have to go to the ballot, and after they pass the law. What's holding them back? Because I think everybody thought this would be additional revenues or something coming in. I don't know that I would say that a lot of them are being held back. I think it's just, government's a slow process, and even after they pass laws, actually 4 states just in the last 2 weeks have passed laws, Tennessee, Iowa, Indiana, and Colorado. They're all a little different, but they all still have to go through a process of issuing regulations and issuing licenses. So, New Jersey was a bit of an outlier. You're seeing, for example, West Virginia and Pennsylvania that passed in Q2 of last year, just starting to get operators live online in the next quarter or two. So it's about a year later by the time they're finally getting live. It just takes a while. Yeah. How far away then are we from all 50 states being on board? I don't know if all 50. I mean, there's going to be some states that choose not to for a very long time. I think we'll get a very large percentage of the country within 4 to 5 years, as in 30-plus states. I'm also curious about mobile, because you guys did launch the first mobile app in New Jersey. I mean, what additional opportunities do you see with mobile? Well, mobile is where all of our volume almost is in New Jersey. I mean, we have a small amount of volume coming through retail, and it's a great space in Atlantic City at resorts, but it's just so convenient for people to use their mobile device. You can use it from anywhere in the state. It's not just us. It's in Jersey overall. About 85% of revenue is coming from mobile now. So it's really critical, and it's also how most of the black market operates today. Which is nice to know. Yeah, well, it's where people want to go. It's where people operate. Yeah. I am also curious about competition. We have Fox getting into this. I mean, how do you see that? Is it just the more the merrier, or do you see it as competition for your
users.
We always knew this is going to be competitive, so.
But it's a big media name.
I actually think that's a great thing, and I'll tell you why. It mainstreams it in a way that we never could on our own, and I think it also is going to prompt other interesting partnership opportunities that emerge because, as we know, once one big company in a space makes a move, others start moving faster. And I think a lot of the media companies have been kind of biding their time, figuring out their strategy. Now I think you're going to start to see some real partnership moving.
So you anticipate more big media names coming on and doing the same?
That's a guess. I don't have any reason to believe it other than in every other market I've seen when one big competitor jumps, the others tend to, or at least some of them tend to start moving.
Jason, what does it mean for you guys? I mean, at one point you tried to get together with FanDuel, right? That got blocked by regulators. You have a deal, a partnership with Caesars, right? And they've taken an equity stake, and they're going to get a piece of some of your gambling revenue. So does that become, are you looking to do more with them, a bigger partnership at some point?
Well, we have a lot of really exciting things we can do with Caesars. They have an amazing set of resort properties, and I think there's a lot we can do over time with them as a partner. And we're also partnering with a number of other great casino operators. We're trying to partner with different media companies. Disney owns a stake in our company, so that's interesting to us. We think having multiple relationships is important, and Caesars is a really good one.
Do you think then, so then ultimately you can stay solo, go it alone, and just have these partnerships, or do you think ultimately you'll hook up with somebody else?
I don't know.
Especially as there's more competition.
I think whatever makes sense is what we'll do. Right now, I feel our best route is to stay solo, and that can change over time. Markets consolidate as time goes on, but right now, I think we have an amazing opportunity in front of us. We're growing like crazy. We grew over 60% in Q1 year over year.
That's revenues?
Yeah, so we have a really big opportunity in front of us, and we'll have to see how things play out. And right now, I think our best bet is to stay alone, though.
All right.